So this experiment is basically the hypothesis is you can grow vegetables easily in 100% biochar containers. So that is a new sort of experiment. I've seen 2 others on YouTube doing it. There's probably others, but I haven't seen them. I've seen people suggest that it's possible. So-called experts on biochar and stuff suggest it, but this experiment is to show that the hypothesis is that it works, and my conclusion is that it works quite well. So that's why this video is mostly up here, and I'm happy to tell you about every aspect of that process. Okay, here's a picture looking good just before we had our cold snap and everything died off. All right, here's a picture when I first put these plants in. They were pretty stressed out, obviously. Here's a couple weeks later. They're going well and growing. I'm taking a picture every 4 or 5 weeks here. Yeah. Come home after work and check out the plants and like, okay, look at this one, August 29th. Now they're bigger. Oh yeah, now they're looking good. So I started taking a picture every 4 or 5 days, I think. And then here's a great one. This is right when I'm like, shit, these suckers are going. They're filling out the space, and it works. And I attend to them for a half an hour once a week, and look at that. It's pretty hot out here. They probably could have used some shade, to be honest. Like, they got beat by the sun here in Reno for sure. Okay, and that's it before the cold snap. How do you make biochar? Briefly. You it's called pyrolysis. You heat up, you bake wood at, I believe, 500, maybe it's 700 degrees with as little oxygen as possible so that it does not combust. That pressure and that heat squeezes everything except for the carbon out of wood. Like when you have a campfire at the beach and you're left with charcoal at the end. All that black stuff, that's charcoal. That is has been heated with that and not combusted to turn to ash. So, okay, so basically you take a bunch of wood, throw it in a barrel configured a certain way that heats the wood as much as possible, avoiding oxygen. That takes about an hour. You heat it up, nice big fire, fun to do. Now you got charcoal in there. But the thing to make it activated charcoal is you take water and hose it down. You hose it down so that it just fizzes, and what that does, it cracks all the charcoal because it's hot. Then you get the cold water on there, and they say it cracks the charcoal, making more pores and nooks and crannies on the charcoal. Activated charcoal, it is called now. Now the next step is to add casting tea and manure teas, which is called inoculation. So now you're going to inoculate it with all the beneficial bacteria and fungus that is in those teas. Okay, so now we've made our teas, our liquid soil. Now we inoculate our biochar with that, and the biochar, so I've heard, is 1 gram of it has the surface area of a football field. So meaning it's full of nooks and crannies. Those nooks and crannies become, it's been said, like condominiums for all the microbiology. So the fungus, the bacteria, and the foods for the fungus and the bacteria can be stored inside the nooks and crannies of the biochar. So biochar is just supposedly really good for that, and I've found it's true. People are using biochar to remediate soils, so they'll add like 2, 3, 4% to soils to help hold moisture and nutrients in the soils if the soils drain too much. People are adding 10% here and there, 20% to container gardening. But what the experiment we're really working with is there's a couple people that have shown that it's good, and I'm showing that it's good as well. 100% biochar and bioponics. Yes. Here's some pictures of the roots. Look at these roots. You know, we took apart, please look at some of the pictures. You'll see we take apart the growing container. I'll tell you more about the growing container later. We take it apart mainly to show the roots underneath peeking out of holes that have gone into the reservoir. I got to these roots a week later than I wanted to. We had a cold snap and things started dying off. So, but they look like super healthy roots. They're not getting rotted in this grow medium the way that we're doing it. So you'll see the pictures of that. Then I crumbled apart the biochar to see the root mass. These are in 5-gallon containers. Pretty much the whole 5-gallon container. Each container has 2, maybe 3 plants in it. Tomato plant, pepper plant, 2 plants. The whole 5-gallon, as you'll see, is filled with white, healthy roots. It really looks like they would have grown. If they weren't in containers, they would have kept growing really far and wide. These plants also were kind of very stressed, started very late in the season, had a hard life, but once I brought them here, I only failed to water them 2 or 3 times, and they looked a little droopy. Then I added water within an hour or 2, they're back looking good. So, and then also look, the vibrancy of some of the later pictures just before we had our cold snap. Lots of tomatoes, lots of healthy peppers, and I wish I had electricity so I could have watered them every day, so I wouldn't have run into that problem. But I took care of them maybe a half hour a week, if that. So that's all I did was water them. With these containers, they always have a little water at the bottom. Watered them once a week with my teas. So super simple, and those are the results there. Okay, so we're talking about the worm tea. I was doing a small system, we'll call it worm tea, but it's worm castings tea, and also compost tea. By compost, in this situation, I just mean I went to the nursery and bought 5-gallon bucket of compost. Good compost. I heard it was really good. So I have, I'm going to make teas out of this. So I'm speaking to a beginner, I suppose, at this case. So I'm going to make teas, and what that is you take, in my case, a 5-gallon bucket. I take a handful of worm castings, fresh, and a handful of compost, and I put it in the 5-gallon bucket. I fill it up with water, and then I add a half teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon of sugar, white sugar. And then I mix it up, and I wait 24 hours. So what's happening in there is there's a lot of bacteria that lives in the worm castings. When I add the sugar, the bacteria eats the sugar and blooms from, say, 1 trillion microorganisms to a trillion microorganisms overnight. It blooms. When the bacteria blooms, so does the fungus, eats the bacteria, and so do all these protozoa and all these other microbiology. They eat the bacteria. So I feed the bacteria. The bacteria feeds all those other critters. All those other critters, when they poo out the bacteria, they're feeding the plants. So you have a jungle in the soil. I'm feeding in bioponics. We're feeding that culture that's in the I call it soil, but it's in the biochar. That culture that's living in there of all those microbiological animals I talked about earlier. So You just feed them sugar. You feed the bacteria. That's all you really feed, and the bacteria feeds everything else. Then all that stuff supposedly talks with the roots and of the plant. So if you got a pepper plant in there, it's going to want slightly different situation around their root zone. They call it the ribosome, I think, and around their root zone than a tomato plant. So from what I read on this subject, Laura Ingraham, she's the queen of all this, and is that the tomato plant will talk with the microorganisms and say, hey, I need these certain sugars from you, and if you get those to me, I can go reach up into the sky, grab some nitrogen and some stuff out of the sky, and I can get some energy from the sunlight, and I can bring it down to you. What is it you want? So the plant and the living plant and the living soil talk with each other, come to an agreement on how to be best symbiotic. So that's basically how bioponics works. Approach them with a system that we can set up in an hour once we get practice at it. And a guy could come by for a half hour a week or 15 minutes twice a week to make sure the system's working if we installed it in somebody's house. And soon enough, even if the owner of the system or the house would see how easy it is, and we can pass off the work to them, or they can now take care of their victory garden themselves. So that's one vision.